Looking back, I don't think I've ever played a Game Freak title that wasn't connected to Pokemon, and I know they've worked on a few other games outside of that franchise, but Beast of Reincarnation immediately caught my attention because I wanted to see what the studio could create without being limited by Nintendo hardware. From what I've played so far, Beast of Reincarnation has been a pretty enjoyable experience. In today's video, I'm going to be going over how the game performs on the Xbox Ally X, what you can expect while playing, and the settings I'm using in order to get the most stable experience possible. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the settings first. These may not be the absolute best settings for everybody, but it's what worked best for me and provide a stable overall experience. If you happen to have better settings that work better for you, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below so others can benefit from them as well. So starting with the display settings, I am running this at 1600 by 900 with VSync turned off, completely unnecessary. There was no frame tearing whatsoever. For the graphics, I have ray tracing disabled, and I started with the medium graphics preset and then made a couple adjustments from there. The frame rate is capped at 60 FPS, and I have the cutscene settings set to performance. The cinematic option does cap it at 24 FPS, and I found that the transition from 24 FPS back to the higher frame rate gameplay was just a little too jarring, so I preferred to just leave it at performance. The VRAM limit is set to the middle option. For upscaling, I am using AMD FSR 3 set to balance with the sharpness set as shown on screen. For the individual graphic settings, I do have mesh quality and post-processing set to low. Texture quality is set to one step below the maximum, and motion blur is turned off, although this is completely personal preference, so you could go ahead and leave that on if you prefer to. For the Xbox Ally X itself, it's primarily playing in 20-watt manual mode and 900p with all the AMD enhancements disabled. I'll also be showing you gameplay running at 35-watt turbo mode so you compare the two power profiles. During my time with the game, I noticed some inconsistencies with the frame rate. Whether I was playing at 20-watt or 35-watt turbo mode, performance remained surprisingly similar. There wasn't as much of a bump as I was expecting. Most of the time, I was averaging somewhere between the low 40s to mid 40 FPS. The game would occasionally reach 50 FPS in door areas, corridors, cutscenes, things like that, where it was just simply less to render. In larger open environments, like the one shown here, the game generally stayed around 45 FPS. During combat or fast movements, the frame rate would sometimes dip slightly, but it usually recovered almost immediately. In some situations, the frame rate would briefly fall into the low 30s, particularly after it's like a boss fight, when entering new areas, or for some reason when the dog companion would just spawn into the scene. One good example happened during the first major boss battle in the game. It released spores into the environment and the entire area just takes on like a brownish orange color. During the sequence, the frame rate dropped into the mid 30s and briefly falls to about 32 FPS while the boss is moving away. At first, I assumed this was just caused by the lower wattage. I went ahead and replayed the entire section at 35-watt turbo mode to see whether or not the additional power would improve the performance. Surprisingly, it made very little difference. At 35 watts, the frame rate was about 1 or 2 FPS higher during the same exact sequence. It still dropped into the mid 30s and reached around 34 FPS. That technically is an improvement, but not enough to justify the extra power usage. I initially thought that maybe this was just an issue with this specific boss fight, but the same behavior appears throughout the open world as well. At 20 watts, the game generally stays around mid 40s depending on where you're looking and what's happening on screen. Switching over to 35-watt turbo mode may briefly increase the frame rate while you're looking into the pause menu, but once you begin moving around in the open area, it usually settles back down into the mid 40s. It may occasionally creep closer to 50 FPS, but I saw similar results at 20 watts as well. What makes this even more interesting is the fact that the APU is clearly pulling considerably more power at 45 watts, even though it's set to 35-watt turbo mode. Yet the performance increase is minimum. The higher wattage does improve consistency slightly and helps with the lower frame rate dips, but it doesn't provide a massive increase in the average frame rate. Now, because of all that, my recommendation is fairly simple. If you're playing on the battery, use 20-watt manual mode. There's very little reason to push the system to maximum TDP when the performance difference is so small. If you're plugged in, you might as well use 35-watt turbo mode. You won't gain a dramatically higher FPS, but it will help make those lows slightly more consistent. Overall, Beast of Reincarnation runs reasonably well on the Xbox Ally X. It could definitely benefit from additional optimization, and I'm sure some players will want some better performance, but the game is still completely playable. Even when the frame rate dipped into the mid 30s, it never really felt overly stutter or unpleasant to play. During most of the experience, it was running between 40 to 45 FPS, and the game felt smooth and looked good with these settings. Also, keep in mind that YouTube compression affects the footage you're watching. The image on the Xbox Ally X display looks slightly cleaner and sharper than what you see on the uploaded video. That's going to be it for this one. If you happen to have any questions about the game, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. If you found settings that work better for you, share those as well so other players can try them out for themselves. If you haven't already, consider subscribing, like the video, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.